Chapter 5, Alex's Path. Well, where we left off, he was headed down into this dungeon of the stronghold that Dolan said that that's where his test lied. And he was wondering, well, what test? And, he told him that his father had set up this test for him. And so he went down there, and the door unlocked. Dolan spoke the word. It come open, and he went down some more winding steps till he got to the bottom, and it was real foggy in this room, like an eerie fog. And he seen what he could see was some tables and some desks, and he seen off in the distance. He thought he could make out a figure, but he couldn't tell. Then all of a sudden, he thought he seen something move in the fog, just real quick, just like a glimpse. And Alex quickly pulled his sword, and he tried talking to it. He thought, well, if it told him to do these things with the wolves and stuff, he held it out and he said, "What is it?" And he held it out and he concentrated real hard. And then all of a sudden he hears this voice says, "It's a worm." About that time, this big old worm, giant earthworm, pops out of the fog, and it opens its mouth, and it's got all these razor sharp teeth. Alex jumped back. He was in shock. I mean, it was huge. It was at least 12 foot. He couldn't tell how long it was, but it was 12 foot, and it had a head on it about that big round, about a foot and a half across. And Alex took a defense best he could. The worm lunged at him, and it clipped the side of his shoulder, which it cut him a little bit, and he went back, but he had his sword arm free, and he come up and he gashed it real bad on the side. And the worm, of course, it let out a squeal, and it took off back underneath the fog. Well, Alex knew the best thing he could do is get up on higher ground, so he went up the steps a little bit, and he waited. And then he concentrated again on this sword. And then all of a sudden he felt the handle getting real warm. And then all of a sudden, here comes that worm again. And he drops on one knee, and the worm comes up over his head, and he jams the sword up through the worm and holds it there while it struggles. And then he did like this, and it came off and went back in the fog again. He wasn't sure if he had killed it or what, but he stood his ground. Well, time went by and nothing came back out of the fog, so he started back down the steps. Then all of a sudden something come up and swept his feet, and it was the worm's tail. It come on and swept, and he slid down the steps on into the room, into the fog. And next thing you know, this thing's wrapping himself around Alex. Well, Alex got another clear hit, and he was chopping the worm, and it was starting to constrict him. And it was getting harder and harder for Alex to breathe. And then finally, he must have hit a vein or a jugular, and the worm just oozed. And then the tightening stopped, and the worm just fell to the ground. Alex come up, breathing hard, and a little choked up. And he goes, "Gosh." and that's some test, you know. And then he seen uh, a candle in the middle of the room, and he couldn't see, it was a pretty dark room. So he took out he had this little flint and steel there he carried with him when he was hunting, so he could start fires. And he struck it a few times and it lit the candle. And then as the room started to light up, he looked around and he seen what he thought was a figure was actually a mannequin with some shiny chainmail. It real pretty in the candlelight and everything. And all of a sudden, the candle started spitting out little fireballs, not big fireballs, but little fireballs, like one of those little Roman candles that you see on the 4th of July. And then an image appeared over the candle, and it was his father. And he said, "Don't be afraid, Alex." He said, "If you're here, that means something must have gone wrong, and you're out on your own now." He goes, and I must not be around, but you must find me, and the only way you can find me is to look up a friend of mine. He's an old wizard. His name is Galen, and he lives in a tower on an island. He said north of this place. So he said that's who you need to seek out, and he may know where I'm at, or I may be dead, and I hope not, for your mother's sake and your sake. And he went to speak to the candle, said, "But Mom's dead, Dad." And of course he didn't get no answer, because this was pre-recorded into this magical candle. Because when it's lit, it makes a hologram of whoever lit it and talked to it before. So he finally realized that, and he listened, and he said, "In this room is equipment that will aid you on your days of finding my old mentor." Said he created this room, he created the creature that I imagine you just fought. He said the creature was necessary to see if you were ready. I took the same trial before. And so I just looked around and seen this armor, he said, and that's my armor. He said it's very tough armor. It still can be penetrated, but it's made some of the best dwarven smiths around. So he said, and it's yours. And he said there's also a chest in the far corner. And he said, and the key is located behind the loose brick on the far side. So he went looking for this loose brick, and he found the key. And he opened up the trunk, and it had about everything he needed. It had rope, and it had some little picking tools, which he never picked locks before. And he never knew his dad had either. But there was what they call thieving tools, but he never used them. His dad had put them in this trunk, There was 2 little potions, and Alex it had a belt pouch in there, so he put on the belt pouch, and he packed up all this stuff that his father had left him. And then he put on the armor, which is it was absolutely awesome armor. It was shiny, and it had an emblem in the middle, and he was not really sure what that meant. But then he seen the little 4-leaf clover in the center of the other emblem, and he realized that this armor was related to this sword. So he took the sword out, and he asked the sword, he goes, he said, "I see that there's a 4-leaf clover on your hilt and on the armor." And she said, "Well, we're a set. Actually, we're brother and sister." And he said, "Brother and sister?" And then all of a sudden there was a voice that called out, and said, "Sister, you're finally here. We've been united. And who's this?" And she said, "Well, this is Alex, our new master." He goes, "Welcome, young Alex. I will protect you as much as possible." He said, "I have certain special abilities. I have a couple of special abilities that just need to be called upon, and you will discover them in time." Alex thanks an enchanted sword, enchanted armor, and they both had a personality. And he said, "Well, how y'all becoming these items?" He said, "Our souls are trapped in these items by an evil sorceress, and your father saved us from, they had went in and we were in the horde, and he had took up me and my sister, and we had aided him. My sister has the power of fear, which you have already discovered. You can hold her out and she can strike fear into enemies. And she can also detect what kind of enemies you're up against. And she's got telepathy where she can talk to you. My powers, on the other hand, is hardness, because I can take a lot of blows. And I also have some other abilities which you will have to discover in time, because I'm not allowed to tell you what abilities I have until they are used and you discover them. So Alex was like, wow, he got the armor on, and there's a mirror down there, and he checked himself out, and he said, "Alright." So he went up there, and Dolan said, you made it." And he said, well, he said, "What's your next stop? I'm sure I knew that candle was down there and your father told you where to go." And he said, "Yeah, he did." And he said, "An island north of here." And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "You'll have to go to another city, to a port." So Dolan told him where to go. And he said, "The other kids I'll take back to the village." And he said, "Well, me, Tessa, and you could take the girls." And Mara and Tara said, "No, we want to go with you, Alex." So he said, "Okay." So they all decided that they were going to stick together, Alex, Tessa, Mara, and Tara. And so they packed up all their stuff and they headed out of the stronghold and headed north. Next chapter, chapter 6, Into the Fray.